Welcome back. Today I am going to share few updates on COVID-19 and kidney injury. This is basically a literature update. It will be explained in the following headings: epidemiology, etiology, management, followed by COVID-19 and renal transplant, and COVID-19 in patients who are already on maintenance hemodialysis. Coming to the epidemiology, this is one of the early data which came from Wuhan, China, stating that COVID-19 does not result in acute kidney injury. They followed the standard universal protocol and they said that acute kidney injury was uncommon in COVID-19 and is very unlikely to aggravate CKD patients who develop COVID-19 disease. This is another article came on JAMA from Wuhan itself. Here also the incidence of acute kidney injury was very low. It was around less than 5%. In ICU patient it was around 8%. This is another article showing that acute kidney injury presence is very low. It was around 5%. But this was not the scenario in European and American subcontinent. They reported a higher number. It came around 25% in Italy, up to 27.8%. In New York, it was around 36.6%. And these are the total data which we have put together inside China and outside China. So if we place everything together, we can see in Wuhan it was around 0 to 17%. China outside Wuhan it was around 0 to 29%. In Seattle they didn't measure the total number of patients with acute kidney injury, but they said in critically ill patients 19% went for renal replacement therapy. In other states it was around 28%. In critically ill it was very high, up to 68%. In New York it was 37 to 43%. In critically ill again it came to 68%. And renal replacement therapy was done in 31.5% who became critically ill. So this is a very high number. Coming to UK, they said it was around 24.6% in patients who are critically ill required renal replacement therapy. So outside China, the report is very high, especially in critically ill patient. Data here is sketchy because of the variable testing rates and denominator is uncertain. And criteria for admission to critical care units vary from region to region and varies from country to country. So what about the severity of COVID-19 acute kidney injury? Here it was found that in patients who develop acute kidney injury, the inflammatory markers was very high. For example, the ferritin was very high. It was around 1016 compared to 680 in patients without AKI. CRP was 163 in the average compared to 93 in patients without acute kidney injury. LDH was also higher in patients who develop acute kidney injury. This is a very good article. This happened in New York. They conducted the study in 13 hospitals and the number of patients was very high. Around 5,449 patients was analyzed in this cohort study. And what they found was that patient who had acute kidney injury 3 was actually more critically ill. So patients with acute kidney injury 3 stage 3 was higher and the death rate was higher in patients who had acute kidney injury stage 3. So all over they had an average of 36.7% of acute kidney injury. Stage 1 it was around 50%, followed by stage 3 31%, followed by stage 2 around 22%. So that means that most of the patient who goes on stage 1 has a chance for going for stage 3. This shows the importance of identifying the acute kidney injury in the very early stage and to take some preventive measures. And again we can see the time of developing acute kidney injury. Most of the patients develop acute kidney injury at the time of admission or day 1 and the second peak was seen after 1 week. What about the relation of ventilation with acute kidney injury? Basically, more severe the disease, more chances of invasive ventilation. and patient who had renal replacement therapy, almost all the patients, that is 23.2% of the patient went for ventilation, whereas only 0.2% of the patient was not on ventilator. Same with acute kidney injury stage 3, higher the disease, higher chances of getting into ventilator was also noted. What about the exact timing? It was found that the timing of intubation was almost corresponding to the timing of acute kidney injury, probably because of the higher inflammatory changes in the lung, which corresponds to the acute kidney injury. So most of the patients develop acute kidney injury at the time of intubation. So they concluded saying that acute kidney injury was frequently among patients with COVID-19. It occurs early and in temporal association with respiratory failure, and it carries a very poor prognosis. This is another article where they said that the patients with acute kidney injury 3 was higher in ICU when compared to patients without ICU admission, and as expected the death rate was higher in patients with acute kidney injury in ICU. This is about the recovery from acute kidney injury who discharge or die. Here we have seen the total overall cases, dialysis cases, and patient who had death. So severe the acute kidney injury, more bad the outcome. What are the common abnormalities we see? We can see albuminuria in 34%. The most common urine abnormality is proteinuria around 64%, and hematuria was seen in 26.7%. Few patients had the CT kidney, which basically showed reduced density, which is suggestive of inflammation and edema. And in these cases or case series, acute kidney injury was an independent risk factor for hospital mortality. Coming to the etiology, this is a very good article where they went in a systematic way identifying the causes of acute kidney injury. Here, the most common cause was acute tubular injury. Ischemic was the most important one. Around 66% of the patient had hemodynamic instability either due to hypertension or shock or due to atrial fibrillation. This was followed by toxic acute tubular injury, rhabdomyolysis around 4% of the patient, and we had few patients who had damage due to toxic agent like vancomycin or contrast, and some numbers of collapsing glomerulopathy or proliferative glomerulonephritis was seen. This is a postmortem case series study which reported that 9 out of 26 autopsy done in COVID-19 patient had acute kidney injury. Primarily on light microscope, this is characterized by diffuse proximal tubular injury and some amount of necrosis. The arrow indicates loss of brush borders in the proximal tubular epithelium. The lumen shows the presence of necrotic epithelial debris as marked by the asterisk here. In this picture, we can see that there is vacuolar degeneration of the tubular epithelial cell as indicated by the arrow. The arrowhead shown here highlights the RBC aggregates that are obstructing the peritubular capillaries. Here, the presence of pigmented cast containing high level of creatine phosphokinase was shown by the arrow, which was indicative of rhabdomyolysis. This was seen in 3 out of 9 cases. This is another preprint of autopsies of 6 patients who died. Sections were stained H&E. Arrow indicated infiltrative lymphocytes as shown here, and the arrowhead indicates viral infection associated with syncytia as indicated here. This is the lymphocyte infiltrative indicative of viral infection. The first image shown here stating that this is showing a collapsing glomerular tuft, podocytes vacuolization and tubular necrosis. Whereas here we can see tubular reticular inclusions in the glomerular and endothelial cells. This is a case of tubular reticular inclusions in COVID-19 related collapsing glomerulopathy. This is another case where the patient had COVID-19 and she recovered. Although her respiratory status improved, the patient became dialysis dependent during her hospital course and she didn't recover from the kidney function at the time of discharge. Biopsy was taken which showed tubular necrosis in the panel A. In the panel B, we can see the food process effacement, and in panel C, we can see tubular reticular inclusions within the glomerular cells. So this is another example of glomerulopathy in patients with COVID-19. So as I said, we can see tubular injury in the panel A. We can see collapsing glomerular tuft in the panel B. In the panel C, we can see food process effacement followed by inclusions in the glomerular endothelial cells in the panel D. This is another article which actually went to a molecular level. They tried to find the ACE2 receptors and TMBB-RS receptors in the kidney, and they were able to find ACE2 expressions and TMPRS expressions was high among the proximal convoluted tubule and the podocytes. This is another histopathology which I discussed before, where they were able to demonstrate the viral inclusions in the cell of the kidney. This is another one showing the viral inclusions. And again here also we can see another study which also showed the viral inclusions within the renal cells. This is another study which they show the patient with collapsing glomerulopathy. In this case, they were not able to show virus in the kidney. So they stated that no characteristic viral particles were seen. There were signs of diffuse endothelial injury and there were tubulo-reticular inclusions. These findings suggest a systemic response to severe acute respiratory syndrome COVID-2 with enhanced type 1 interferon expression, which may be responsible for the glomerular or endothelial lesion. The issues has become little more complicated when a correspondence pages of a Kidney International journal stating that whether the particle noted in electron microscopes are actually the virus or whether they are clathrin coated pits or even multivesicular bodies. Another reason for this acute kidney injury can be the cytokine release syndrome seen in severe COVID-19. And there is also cross-talking between the organs, like lung-kidney interactions in critically ill can also be another reason for this, where ventilation or ARDS also plays a role. So putting things together, we can see it is divided into prerenal and renal. Prerenal is basically because of the hypotension where we are having hypovolemia or hypohemodynamic issues. It can be a direct damage because of the virus, which is shown in the above studies, or it can be an indirect damage because of the cytokine storm, immunological response, or it can be because of the ventilation due to ARDS. Coming to COVID-19 in patients who are already on maintenance hemodialysis. This article in press from Spain evaluated 36 patients who was on maintenance dialysis who developed COVID-19. What they found that among survivors and non-survivors, the lymphocytes at the admission day 7 was on the lower side among the non-survivors. That basically the non-survivors had a lower lymphocyte compared to the patient who survived. Again, among the non-survivors, the amount of LDH was high compared to the patient who survived. This was also true with the CRP, where the CRP was very high in patients with non-survivors. So they said that the early clinical symptoms in patients with CKD on maintenance dialysis were mild when compared to the general population. They had low rate of fever, they had low fatigue, and they had low cough. And a high proportion of the patients presented with hypoxia with a saturation less than 95. And most of the patients presented had bilateral pneumonia with a typical radiological pattern. One thing which we have to note that interpretation of CT in patients with CKD on maintenance hypodialysis is going to be difficult because ground glass appearance can be a part of COVID-19 or can be a part of fluid overload. And they said the mortality in patients with CKD on maintenance hemodialysis is high. Lymphopenia and increased LDH carries a poor prognosis. Here the mortality was around 35%. Coming to the management, there is no proper guidelines to say how to treat a patient with acute kidney injury in COVID-19. This is one which was published in Italy, which gives a rough idea about the management side. Here they said there is no specific treatment options. Intensive care is mainly supportive. Current approaches to prevent and management of acute kidney injury are based mainly on clinical experience. So they said implementation of the standard protocol, like the standard protocol which we are having the guidelines. If the patient is on ventilator, lung protective ventilation lowers the risk of acute kidney injury by limiting ventilation-induced hemodynamic effects and the cytokine burden on the kidney. So go for a lung protective ventilation. About fluids, adjust the fluid balance according to the volume responsiveness and tolerance. Try to restore normal volume. Avoid hypervolemia or volume overload because this can lead to pulmonary edema, right ventricular overload, congestion, and subsequent acute kidney injury. Volume depletion should be avoided. It is very common at the time of admission because of the fever, and pre-hospital fluid resuscitation is rarely performed. So correct the hypovolemia. And we have seen that most of the patient goes for prone ventilation if they are critically ill. So some word about the HD catheter. During turning the patients to the prone ventilation, the dialysis catheter need to be secured and monitored to avoid dislocation and kinking, and probably right jugular vein is a preferred insertion site as the catheter exit site and anchoring remains visible when the patient is in prone position. This is in comparison with a femoral insertion. So always better to have a right jugular vein if possible. And what about patients who goes for ECMO? When RRT is carried out in conjugation with ECMO, RRT should be performed through the venous access independent of the ECMO circuit. This is to minimize the clot and formation of clot in the ECMO circuit. But in some cases, if we are not having enough line, we have to keep the RRT and ECMO in a single line. In that case, it should be connected to the pre-oxygenator limb of the ECMO, as the oxygenator can serve as a protective barrier and minimize the risk of gas embolism in the lung. We need a frequent surveillance of the system connections, CRT circuit, and the oxygenator pressures because this can minimize the clot formation. We might require a greater systemic anticoagulation, so chances of hemorrhage is also very high. So what about the dialysis? The main problem we are facing is going to be the filter patency. Both clogging and clotting is seen in the dialysis machine. Clogging basically means the blood components accumulate inside the pores of the membrane and blocks the pores, whereas clotting is basically clots form and blocking the lumen of the filter. And it is found there is a high prevalence of clogging and clotting in patients with COVID-19. Here we can see a protein cake which actually results in clogging of the filter. The anticoagulation protocol must be tailored to the need of the individual patients. In CRRT, regional citrate anticoagulation is more efficacious than other anticoagulation method. This prolongs the extracorporeal circuit lifespan and reduces the risk of bleeding. And there are some suggestions like lowering the post-filter ionized calcium concentration to 0.25 to 0.35 in patients with COVID-19. And they also said achieving a target starting dose of citrate of around 3.5 millimole per liter of treated blood. This is the approach which they did in Italy. And if using low molecular weight, keep an initial dose of 3.5 milligram per hour and try to keep the anti-factor XA 10A between 0.25 and 0.35. If you are using unfractionated heparin, initial dose of 10 to 15 international units per kg per hour is advised, and try to keep a APTT between 60 and 90 seconds. Evidence suggests that pre-filter anticoagulation with low molecular weight heparin provides a higher circuit lifespan compared to unfractionated heparin. In some patients, bacterial infections co-occurs and there is like a sepsis-like syndrome with lot of cytokines. In this type of patient, we can try endotoxin removal or cytokine removal or immunomodulation. So sequential extracorporeal therapies can be considered. This is an algorithm showing the management. You can go through it. I have given the link in the last of the study. But in case you are having resource limitation, in some part of the world like US, Italy, they had a lot of patients with COVID-19 where they went for resource limitation. So what they did, they convert the CRRT to prolonged intermittent kidney replacement therapy. They considered acute peritoneal dialysis. They used conventional HT machines and do SLED. And they converted conventional hemodialysis machines for intermittent hemodialysis. This is mainly to get more patients during a particular time. And this is a sample protocol of the peritoneal dialysis. There are a lot of protocol available. This is one among them. And if you are having time, this is a very good article about peritoneal dialysis during COVID-19. The link I have mentioned on the screen below. And what about the COVID-19 in the peritoneal fluid? Initially, there were few studies saying that COVID-19 was not present in the peritoneal fluid. But later in another surgical, they have said that COVID-19 is present in the peritoneal fluid of COVID-19 patient because they were able to isolate SARS-CoV-2 in the peritoneal fluid. And this is a recent article saying that the editor said that at this time, it is not clear whether a positive PCR test of SARS-CoV-2 means infective. So just getting a COVID positive by RT-PCR doesn't mean that patient is infective. We have to attempt culture in virus or such fluid to know whether it is infective or not. And what about the drug adjustment we have to do in COVID-19 patients on RRT? This is a table showing the usual drugs we use for COVID-19. I have given the link here. You can go to the link to find the detail about the drugs. Coming to COVID-19 and renal transplant, most of the data was from the Western country like Italy, US and all. The main problem which we are facing during this time is that the immunosuppressive agent used in the management of glomerular disease and kidney transplant recipients have an inherent potential to cause lymphopenia or to impair lymphocyte function. In patients with severe COVID-19, they present with lymphopenia and lymphocyte count has been negatively associated with disease severity. Cytokine storm is also responsible. This is a good review article where the authors were from different parts of the world. They were from Austria, Korea, India, UK and USA. They stated that the treatment of SARS-CoV-2 positive kidney transplant patients are lacking. So it is fair to assume that reducing maintenance immunosuppression could be the key of management. They said post-transplant immunosuppression, in particular with calcineurin inhibitor drugs like cyclosporin and tacrolimus, compromise the adaptive T cell response to a much greater extent than innate immunity. And this results in an increased risk of uncontrolled viral spreading and invasion. Based on this in vitro data, it might be speculated that cyclosporin could be used as a preferred calcineurin inhibitor drug during COVID-19 pandemic. The data of tacrolimus is not available. They said, in case if the patient is having mild disease or mild COVID-19, they should continue to receive their CNI and prescribed dose of glucocorticoid, but their anti-proliferative drugs should be stopped. If the patient is having a severe course, like the patient is on ICU or requires mechanical ventilation, calcineurin inhibitors and anti-proliferative drugs should be stopped immediately, and we have to increase the dose of glucocorticoid. Whether anti-cytokine drugs such as anti-leukin 6 or complement inhibitors should be administered is currently unknown. And this is the largest data. Totally there were about 52 patients which was reported in the 15 case series. So here the table summarizes the data of each patient, what treatment was given during the time of COVID-19 for patients who had renal transplant, and what was the outcome and what was the adjustment. You can go through this article or you can go through this table. Here we can see a lot of people has published a lot of case series all over the world. Going through this table gives a better idea how to approach the patient with COVID-19 renal transplant. In most of the countries, transplant was suspended. In Austria, it was reinitiated in around April 14, but it was limited to patient to kidney transplant with low immunological risk that doesn't require anti-thymoglobulin or alpelisumab induction regimens. It is also important to get consent from the patient about the risk. And there is an interesting article where they published that the surgeon involved in transplant surgery had COVID-19. He was diagnosed to have COVID-19 after the transplant surgery. And the surgeon was very strict with the infection control measures. He had proper hand hygiene, he had surgical face mask and gloves during the surgery. And interestingly, neither the patient nor the staff had COVID positive 19 tested positive because it was not spread from the surgeon to other patients. This shows the importance of infection control measures in the OT and in the ICU. This is another article stating that the combination of lopinavir and ritonavir and HCQ leads to excessive tacrolimus trough level, which can lead to harmful side effect. And it is also noted that viral shedding is prolonged in patients who are on kidney transplant, probably because of the immunosuppression they are having. In general population is around 20 days, whereas in this kidney transplant patient, it was around 65 days. So to summarize, the epidemiology, we are lacking the proper denominator, so it is having a lot of variation, but in critically ill patient it can go up to 65%. Etiology is multifactorial. It is mainly about the acute tubular injury followed by a direct injury by the virus. And patients who are already on maintenance hemodialysis, they are having a poor prognosis because the mortality is high. If they are having lymphopenia and increased LDH, the prognosis is going to be bad. About the management, there are very few guidelines. It is basically based on the clinician decision. And in patients with renal transplant, in case of mild diseases, try to minimize the reduction of the drug, but in case of high severe diseases, we have to increase our dose of glucocorticoid by stopping the other drugs. Thank you.